Well, hello.
Hey there, Doug. How are you doing?
Hi, Ryan. Good to see you.
Good
So
to see
you do a lot
too.
of
Thank you.
standing, do you?
I do. Yep. I stand here at my desk most of the time. Yep.
I
How
do
about
too.
you?
In fact, you know what? I'm just going to do that right now because I have my
Oh,
standing desk.
beautiful. Man, is that your office there?
Oh, I'll show you around. Yeah, this is
Oh my goodness.
it's
That is
very
amazing.
jungly. I have
Yeah.
vines growing all over my bookshelves. And then in the corner, I have an AC right there because sometimes it gets really hot. So
Beautiful.
I disguised the chimney that goes up into the ceiling there.
Wow,
Yeah.
man, well done. That is beautiful.
There's my sofa, and then my little, on her throne,
Oh,
Frankie.
beautiful. Hey, little guy. Wow.
And then, of course, every therapist should have an iceberg somewhere. So
100%. Yep, that is a beautiful one. Man, that is amazing. So I assume your rental person, landlord, has no problem with those vines growing in there.
Oh, they didn't know about it. So I'm not sure. I'm about to move to a larger place on the same complex, and I'm gonna roll them up because I have little hooks that they're hooked on. So I'm gonna roll them up and hopefully transfer them over there.
Man,
they're
that's
like my
amazing.
children, you
Well
know.
done. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. How long have you been in that office?
It's been January of 2019, so it's been a little while.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. I love it. What an office. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I didn't know how much time you have.
I have until 2:30, so an hour and a half.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what all you would like to talk about. I'm sure maybe you were just curious if I had questions or what, but
well, just more of a natural dialogue, you know.
Yeah, great.
I know that I guess you've asked me some things, maybe, or maybe it was through our mutual person that you've shared some questions. I don't remember, but anyways, it's also neat to meet somebody who is coming from a similar background of Christianity and finding it to be the baby there without the bathwater needs to be changed from time to time, but there's something there. And then from that particular lens of the perennial truth, then moving into a larger metaphysics. And that mirrors a little bit of my own journey. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. Well, one, let me just start by saying how much I have appreciated listening to your lectures and reading all your stuff on your website. Good grief. There's a lot of articles that you have put on your website.
Thank you.
Well done. I imagine that's over a period of years or last few years?
2015, I started it. And
wow.
Yeah, just also over 300 probably or so.
Good grief, man. I mean, that's amazing output. So well done. And thanks for that. It's an enormous amount of helpful stuff. So thank you for that. Yeah. And your lectures, I listened to, of course, the one you sent, that was your overview of the raw material, which was wonderful. And I've sent that to several people since, and all with the same feedback of that was the clearest explanation of the law of one I've ever heard. So
wow.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Glory to the infinite creator.
Yeah. It's beautiful. And so I know I've been able to hear a little bit of your story or background just through some of these. I also listened to your one with, what's his name, Buddha at the gas pump. And then,
Rick Archer?
Of course. Yeah, that guy. And then, of course, you know, the audio that you and Matt, of your conversation with Matt. So I've heard some of your biographical details, especially that very interesting story of you at that seminary, with the lynching of yourself at that seminary, whatever that was. But I'd be curious to hear part of my question and part of just where I'm at right now, and maybe it'd be helpful for me to share.
Yes, I would love to hear
a little bit more of where I'm at. Yeah, because then that will fold into a question. Yeah. Just in brief, you know, so as not to make it long, I was born and grew up in Kenya, and then my parents moved back for me to go through high school here in Lubbock. And then so I went through high school here. Of course, I did the whole football thing and played football at Texas Tech. And then when I stopped that, I was in the international business. That was my
You played
major
football
in
at
kind of
Texas
that
Tech?
world. Yes, sir.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's good. Do you follow football or
No,
football?
not really, but I can appreciate the discipline. I played baseball in college a little bit.
Oh,
so,
beautiful.
Yeah, that's cool.
Beautiful. Where did you play?
No. It was a community college in Dallas. So I was
Perfect.
1 year, and then I decided to grow my hair out and move to Mexico. So I did that. But
Perfect.
extremes,
That's awesome.
extremes. Go ahead. Anyways, you had gone to, but that already tells me though that if you grew up in a PK, right, a pastor's kid in Kenya, then you're already you have a certain worldview at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I could say it like I was a bit. This is where, as I started to be aware of what was happening, taking place more psychologically speaking through college, I was identity confused all around, having, culturally worldview confused, growing up in Kenya with Church of Christ background parents, who on the whole gave me a very gracious and wonderful way of being a Christian. They were not the typical kind of legalistic conservative Church of Christ folk, which I'm very grateful for, but nonetheless, an enormous amount of, if I can say, guilt that came in with that whole worldview, but not least of which, and this is what I started to realize, I felt a lot of guilt about being wealthy and being American, being in Kenya. And that, of course, affected my choice of going into international business, which was, in my conscious mind, it was the choice to assist my colleagues and brothers and sisters in Kenya financially as it relates to socioeconomically and such. That was my conscious awareness. It turns out I think there was a lot more going on than I was aware of. But so I did several internships as it relates to that whole area of microfinance. I don't know if you're familiar with that whole area, but
microfinance,
it's basically, yeah. Okay, cool. So I did internships with Dr. Muhammad Yunus, Nobel Peace Prize in Bangladesh and India and Sri Lanka, and then finally got myself to Nairobi, got back to Nairobi, I can say that, after I graduated. Oh, sorry. I heard a girl yell, but they're just playing. And then, long short, what happened was, so I was in the whole development world, and I mean, I still, that's part of my job at the moment, though I'm done with this job in April. But it's all international development, and it's all oriented around a holistic strategy of empowerment of persons and communities. And there's a lot of good about it, but there's also a lot of limitations, needless to say. And one of the things that I started to notice as I was living in Kenya, and then I met my wife there, we got married, then moved down to Malawi. So we've been in Malawi for the last 11 years and moved to Lubbock last year.
Same culture.
So for these last 11, I'm sorry?
Same culture, Malawi, Lubbock, Texas,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It hasn't been traumatic at all.
Nah.
Yeah, especially for the girls.
Jesus.
Our first girl, we have 3 girls, and first girl was born in Malawi, second in Cape Town, and third in Houston, which is a lovely spread. Yeah. So that's been interesting, just their own experience of it, because it mirrors my own in different ways experience of. Awesome. But basically, and I would love to hear any of your thoughts as you hear me kind of just processing this here. But what I started to become aware of is that I was operating out of an enormous amount of guilt. Most of my so-called vocation of being a so-called missionary, which I started to realize as well that the archetype of missionary is laden with all sorts of maybe not so helpful ways of perceiving people.
A lot of colonialism, colonial over.
Yeah. 100%. And, consciously, I'm very against that, but unconsciously, all those patterns were still there. You know what I mean? And one of the primary things that I experienced was, well, in a lot of different ways. To make the long story short, I started to have an enormous amount of angst and resentment towards the people I was working with. because they were mostly very conservative Church of Christ like folk. That's who we were working with.
Yeah.
So I felt, it was just like all day, every day, I was feeling this frustration of, you guys just don't get it. You're so small-minded, narrow-minded, all that stuff. And then finally what happened was I had something of an anxiety breakdown, which is a hilarious story.
But by the way, I keep seeing the thumb up. I'm not doing that.
I know. Every time with Zoom, every time I do double thumbs up or single thumbs up, it just pops up.
Oh, cool. Awesome. All right. What happens if you stick your middle finger out?
I haven't tried it yet.
Oh. See?
It happens. But this is pretty cool.
Dude. See, you're magical. This was PK kids.
That's it. Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. What was I saying? Oh, to diverge on this interesting story, you may appreciate this. I had something of I don't like to use the words anxiety attack, but it was something to that effect, is what it felt like, with an enormous amount of fear that just kind of collapsed me for about 2 weeks. I couldn't do anything. And because what happened was in Malawi, every once in a while this happens, we were told. But a lot of people believe in vampires as like really believe that there are vampires. Needless to say, it's a very witchcraft laden society.
Yeah.
And so basically what had happened was political parties doing their thing started the rumors that there's vampires. They started doing things at night to, very not cool things, hurting people, killing people, and pushing it all on vampires. And then, which that is a problem in and of itself, but doesn't really impact us until they said, and actually the vampires are expatriates, are white people.
Oh, Jesus.
And yeah, so all the animosity of all these villages turned towards all the white people in the country. And we were in this small town, and a bunch of our friends, cars were getting stoned all the time going through the town. We tried to lay low. I was going to South Africa at the time for some gut issues. So leaving my wife and the 3 girls, and that, needless to say, that little episode triggered the whole thing. But that triggered it. But what I realized was through that whole thing was that my way of being was not consistent with my conscious belief system. And my way, and the enormous amount of fear that I was living with, the enormous amount of guilt and enormous amount of resentment that I was living with, they weren't lining up. My conscious worldview was a lot different than that. So that was a whole process of just releasing everything that I thought, and moved more into a journey of, let me expand my mind, expand my heart, expand my way of being, putting practices in place that allow me to function from a different level. And so this was back in 2016, 15, 16. And then, that's when I found Course in Miracles. I found the Law of One.
Oh, really?
For me.
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you have something on that?
Oh, well, I was wondering, the Course in Miracles, did you remember what was the catalyst to get you there, or was it David Wilcock?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Interesting. So it was, I found Wilcock right after I found the Course. So I found the Course through a podcast with Gary Renard, which I have feelings about that now since, but I'm grateful that was the path, whatever the path that allowed me to find and start reading the Course. But then I found David Wilcock right after that. But so I understand from Matt that you know David well.
No, not well. It's funny how the telephone line works, where you say one thing. Yeah. I exchanged a couple of emails with him around that time, probably 2015, 2016, maybe a little bit later. But I had worked with somebody else in his, I didn't really work with him like one-on-one, but I was tangentially connected with Corey Good.
Oh, wow.
And most of Wilcock's stuff at that point was pretty much just, talking about what Corey Good's stuff was. So, but I know I followed Wilcock for a while, Good for a while. And it was a time in my life where I was exploring all these things too. And David Wilcock, it is, I guess, a gateway for a lot of people to have discovered the law of one. So I will hold him and his vocation with some gratitude in that area. I since have moved. I realize a lot of things about my own self, but also the disclosure movement in general that helped me to be where I am now. So I don't disparage it, but I think it's in general the main way to be a disclosure advocate, at least that I've seen, is part of the problem. But that's my own bias, and so it's not like I'm saying I'm right or not, but it's what keeps gives me peace. How do I integrate the psychospiritual stuff inside myself is a way to see to build upon what the good things that I saw, but also to see how it actually has become part of the problem. So anyways, that's to plant a little seed. If we wanted to move in that direction a little bit later, we could do that.
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more on your understanding of that. Where was I anyway? I think I don't have to say too much more. You were 2015,
and you discovered the Course in Miracles and the Law of One a little bit later, and you were in a moment of expanded consciousness because of the anxiety that you hit the top of the ceiling of your belief system and it wasn't working.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Man, that was a great recap. Yeah, that's exactly it. This is one of the things that I can just say also I've really appreciated about listening to your how I'm understanding you talk about not just the Law of One, but just where you are right now. I think it was in the chat with on Buddha at the Gas Pump that you noted finding ways of being more practically grounded in this awareness is helpful, and ways of not just experiencing the love, the self-acceptance, the self-forgiveness. And I really appreciate the concentric drawing that you have in one of your posts. I have that now up on my wall here because that's really helpful for me to just see, like, that's what I've been working through, not just for myself, but mirroring that as I see others, is learning to love, accept, forgive, extend. I absolutely love my favorite quote from the Law of One is the quote of, "This is what the game of life is." Yeah. And you know which one I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, I love that so much. So I think the Course is what helped me first to expand my awareness around how to learn to love and accept someone that I do not agree with the way that maybe they think or they act, but to really do it in a both somatic and a non-spiritually bypassing kind of way.
Wow.
And that's what I think my practice of the last 5 years with the Course, and then, bringing in other elements of understanding through the Law of One. And I'll say in general, I really appreciate Hermetic and Gnostic philosophy as well, Kabbalah philosophy. Yeah. But just bringing in, but I've been in this zone of, I felt it and I heard it at the end of one of your chats. I feel that I'm currently in this season of, I don't want the information and the knowledge anymore. I really want to experience and practice it. And so much so that it becomes my moment reality and experience. When I'm with someone who's in the Church of Christ, that my immediate response towards them is love and acceptance, rather than, I got to try and change your mind, that kind of thing. So that's where I think part of what I learned over these last few years was I was not in Malawi for the reason I thought I was. I thought I was there to, do all these development programs and help people and all that kind of thing. But it turned out I was there primarily to learn to love myself and to love others exactly where they are, as they are. And, the Course really, I think, as the primary text that I was working with, it really opened that in me to be able to learn to see people in a different way. And I'm unendingly grateful for that. And yeah, maybe that's in general where I find myself now. It's like, I love metaphysics and I love learning and expanding my mind, but I felt it. I think you noted, it's irrelevant what stage it is in, but I found myself kind of now in this season of, man, I just don't know. I just don't know how any of this works. And it's like, what I think I know is like the first sentence of a, 5,000 page tome, and that's it. And I'm okay with that. I want to just be grounded in, if I can say it, in more of the vibration of what it is that I want to experience and to live, more so than just be able to articulate it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I love reading stuff, and I love, listening to, your talk on Law of One. It's expansive of the mind in and of itself. And that's always helpful to me. So, yeah. Beautiful.
Wow. Excellent. You really are a seeker that is living in that integrity. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, I'll offer some reflections on what I heard you say, and then
please do.
One of the things is that the word to know, as I believe was originally meant, is gnosis, and gnosis means lived experiential knowledge. And this is way beyond just concepts. These are embodied realities that once you know it, you don't unknow it, and it's yours energetically. Now, it doesn't mean it's right. I like to say it doesn't mean it's undistorted, but it is your knowledge. And I think the West has been amazing in terms of the world's left brain. Like if you can think of the world as a brain, and then the West would be the left side and the East is the right side. So you have the intuitive and
interesting,
the rational on the left. In the Western world, with the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, all these things, it ushered in modernity, and because of modernity, we have been really blessed with things like technology and the fact that you and I can talk this way in different parts of the state. Where are you at now? You're in Lubbock, huh?
In Lubbock. Yeah, that's right.
So that's amazing. Yeah. And the West also has a real gift. If you have to literally just say, talk to her for a little bit, that's not a problem. I've got 3 kids, so I totally understand.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that. No, she went and did something else, so okay. Thanks, though.
No problem. I know it's like taking a bone and throwing it, and then I get it. The other thing that the West does really well is that we have awakened to the capacity to label things, distinguish things, so that we can study them and gather knowledge that way. I mean, that's really amazing that we can do that. Whereas the East would often say that is, Maya, an illusion, it's wrong, those kinds of things. Why would you study that? You get too enmeshed in the differentiations and you forget the whole. And they're right on that. And I think that we're living in a time now where the East and West on a macro scale are starting to mirror the micro scale, things like our conversation today and things that attract you and I, psychospiritually, are going to be this putting together of the left brain and the right brain in a way that our ancestors our descendants have not been able to do, simply because society hadn't been developed at that level yet. So it's not that we're more special. Say we just happen to be alive microly at a time when humanity as a whole is probably about 22 years old. That's what some sociologists or psychologists might. 22. Yeah, wow. Like if you were to take humanity as a whole and average everything out, developmentally, you might be looking at somebody who's about 22.
Wow.
21, 22. And that's important because on a micro level, we know that the human goes through these different stages. And around 21, 22 is the last big boost. The human brain goes through this particular time where, and not everybody goes through it, by the way. If we get stuck in earlier things, and we stay stuck. But for many people then move into this time of being able to start thinking abstractly, holding paradoxes together. And it really is a different kind of consciousness at this last developmental stage. In my metaphysical way of understanding things, I think this is the entree into the green ray center, the heart chakra. I also think it's connected with the fourth density energetics of the earth as we move in. Humanity's moving into that transitional time. So we're talking about the overlapping of two cosmic epochs on a macro level, the third density, the fourth density, and that liminal space there. That's where we're at. And then individually, people like you and I are having this conversation, whereas 10 years ago it was much rarer. But it's popping up all over because, people are responding to the cosmic green ray energy that we're being bathed in every second. And what Ra says is typically what happens is when humanity, let me say it this way. Ra says that when they look at our collective, they see our collective as a single entity, because we're many cells making up one body. I mean, the Christian notion of the body of Christ is right on. That's exactly what it is. But what they say is that they see us as overladen green ray. That we're in a green ray environment, but on top of that is an orange ray overlay. And orange ray is not even yet yellow. I mean, third density is the yellow ray bandwidth, the cosmic bandwidth. The orange ray is actually is even less than that. The orange ray overlay at the macro level, well, at least on the micro level, it means that the orange ray is responsible for our learning our own identity. Who are we? It's this concept of the first rule of the game that you said you liked earlier was to know yourself, and when we, as a macro humanity, either choose to not look at it or cannot, for some whatever reason, look and know ourselves, really look in the mirror, then what we do is we project. They're the problems, they're the problems. Yeah. And what that does is it solves maybe an immediate problem, but it further entraps us in the orange ray energetics to know ourselves. So right now, the tension between the green ray, which is fully 2 energy levels more intense and refined, but our collective is at orange ray, that almost mathematical consciousness incongruity causes this macro existential angst.
Wow.
But since nobody is really, I shouldn't say nobody, people are talking about it now, thankfully. But very few still kind of link it up with the existential angst of a society that's not ready to go into fourth density. And what we have to do is have leaders, teachers like yourself, who feel a calling by doing your own work, to put it in a Christian parlance, to carry your own cross with integrity, fully choosing, accepting, and then learning to balance the self and learning to open ourselves up more to love. That would not only help us through an embodied state expand this green ray love elsewhere, but it also through the teaching that we hopefully can do with others just by conversations, where you meet people and you connect with them, that sparks something that awakens their own sense of the green ray inside. So let me just pause here and see how this resonates with you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful explanation and it resonates a lot. It's really interesting how even those colors, which I wasn't aware of except for the way in which they relate to the chakras colors that are typically given, especially the green of the heart, right? That's interesting. Even just hearing you say that is interesting, and it resonates because, well, in Malawi, for some reason, the dominant color, I would say my favorite color like a child, but my dominant color that I appreciated was orange. So that's really interesting. Like I was kind of dominantly in that mode of unwilling to, if I can say, in some ways unwilling to see the way in which I'm projecting into other people. And then finally the shift that came with the willingness to see that not only am I very clearly psychologically speaking projecting what I don't want to see in myself in someone, but even more than that, failing to align my worldview, which is that we were all one cell, all cells in a body, but failing to live that out in a relational way until, and that's really interesting. And you see my wall too.
Yeah, green.
The shift happened where green, became the dominant color in my feeling and in my life. And a lot of our house is green, and so that all resonates with me. And one of the questions I wanted to ask was, what is, I don't want to presume anything, but I've been feeling, one of the things that I've been noticing with this is part of what the Law of One has been giving to me is learning to love and accept every aspect of myself. And that also means if I can say it this way, the lower three chakras.
Of course. By
way of, I typically have had like frustration towards them, if I can say it that way. Like, come on, all of the sexual desire and whatever is just frustrating.
And just getting angry, getting angry and then being angry that you're angry,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Man, so I've so appreciated, I don't do it well, but these last few months, I've been much more in the mode of how can I love every element of this, that it's all helpful and necessary, and it is part of the energy that comes up that even allows me to experience the energy in the heart. But how do I, maybe I can ask you, what is the practice that you utilize to in some way remain at the heart space? Or I don't want to say it that way because maybe there's some times in which you don't just remain there, but operate dominantly from that space of seeing from the heart.
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I would say a few things on that. One is the Christian notion of being born again, or the quote, no one comes to the Father except through the Son. These can be tied in to that. Now, I'm not saying Christianity didn't royally screw this up and then use it to, to kind of exclude people and then manipulate them. I'm not saying that. And by the way, let me just say this off the bat. I don't believe that religions are wrong. I do not believe that, I am not one to throw away religions. I'm pro-religion. Because the word religion means re-legare. It means to reattach. To reattach to that which helps one enjoy unitive consciousness with everything,
Beautiful.
And I think that the problems that we see in religion, of which there are many, I would say most of the world's problems could be traced in some ways to religious, exclusionary energetics, is less to do with the phenomena of religion and more to do with the developmental stages, psychospiritual developmental stages that we are as a people as well as individually. So I think that religions, to the degree, and Ross says this, most of the Law of One people are New Agey and they hate religions, and it's their biggest problem, and it's the Cabal and Illuminati. Well, I don't know what they do with this, but the Law of One clearly says that all the religions that you guys have are distorted, and the message was half lost. But to the seeker, the pure seeker, to the seeker that is really trying to use, I'm talking the doctrines and dogmas and rituals and all that, in a way with pure intention and fidelity and faith, it can be a pure pathway to the infinite creator. That's enlightenment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, I want to say that off the bat because I think that what we need right now is, this is my opinion, but we need people who are grounded in the conventional world, who then have felt called to explore the so-called New Agey world, and then, but not in the spirit of throwing away the conventional, okay?
Yeah.
In the spirit of moving then back into a larger metaphysical, psychospiritual space where we can help bridge the new cosmic reality that's breaking in with the good rootedness, the psychospiritual boundaries and rootedness that we need as human beings, that often New Agey spiritualities lack. Everybody can be we're all one until something major happens in their life, and then they revert back to earlier regressive psychospiritual states. So anyways, what I would say is to live in the green ray is a new human. It is seeing the world from a new place. It's a new platform of seeing. But we shouldn't stay there either, because Ross says that a green ray activated entity is ineffectual in the face of their other selves who are blocked in the lower chakras. And in fact, will often depolarize from that green ray back into the maelstrom of the lower chakras.
Wow.
Because the green ray energy, that the person who's, let's say, discovered this new way of seeing from a holistic perspective where everything is love, and really have a gnosis of that. Okay. Yeah. That's a breakthrough, but the freedom can be so great where one wants to share this. Now, that's like a newly converted person in Christianity. Like, I want to share this. But the way that they are doing it lacks the wisdom of the blue ray. It lacks the balancing. It lacks the capacity to see more 360, holistically. And so we will often then project our parts of ourselves that we're not aware of yet. We project that, scapegoat other people, or we'll tell people what they should or shouldn't do, or we'll try to get into relationship with them romantically or friendship-wise in order to, quote, change them, even if we wouldn't want to say those things. And then pretty quickly, the blockedness of the other person activates our own inert blockedness, and then we're stuck right back in and entrapped. Because at this point, I think that I am a green ray person helping somebody else with not realizing that my interactions are the lower triad. Do you see?
I love it. That was a great explanation.
Yeah, and this is one of the big things on the disclosure movement that I saw, is that a lot of very, very well-meaning people, their feelings, I would argue, are right, but their worldview from which they're operating and don't know it is not green ray, throat, or higher in the indigo, even though they would say they would be, but rather it's actually part and parcel of the same lower three chakras, but this time in the name of ascendants to fourth density and wanderers and changing the world, and we just got to educate people about the Kabbalah and all. In the name of that, they're actually creating their own energetic prison to which people will be going into and thinking they're ascending. You see?
Man, yeah, that was all really well articulated. I really appreciate that. I can clearly see myself in your explanation there. I've found myself in those shoes many times since 2015, 16. In fact, early on, I did that very unhelpfully.
Well, me too. I mean, that's how I can articulate it so well, because I had to live it,
Man.
And what I would go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So what I would say then is, and Ra also says that when a person makes the choice of polarity, so I'm going to choose the positive path, then the law of responsibility, which is a cosmic law, it's tied to karma, gets activated and is a tool. It's a cosmic metaphysical tool that helps us to hold ourselves accountable to the polarity that we chose. And that is when we start to get into karmic entanglements, that might exist between lives with different people. And which is good, because it ultimately helps us to learn the one thing that we're supposed to do here in third density is make the choice, and then, which is the choice of love, and then live out it enough to be able to handle the lessons of fourth density.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting is that the law of one says that to harvest or to be able to go to fourth density and basically to begin the lessons of fourth density living is 51% of green ray living. But for the negative person, it's 95% heart closure. You have to have 95% service to self, or basically only be loving 5%. I mean, that's pretty intense, But here's the crazy thing. Ra says that both the 51% and the 95% are equally hard. And you might think, how could that be? And Ra says something else that's interesting is, and I've read the Ra material probably 100 times. I mean, almost nonstop since 2013. So I feel like I've moved a little bit deeper from the first reads to more of the deeper stuff. I hope, and I'm not saying I know it. Every day is a new discovery,
Sure.
But what I would say is that the Earth's environment is, but the very nature of third density, the very, very nature of the energetics of the third density, which includes the veil of forgetting, because this is the only plane that has the veil where we, at the deep mind level, forget that we're attached, we are one with God, we are one with each other. The very nature of that is the environment that creates the capacity to evolve at a psychospiritual level through competition and cooperation, both competition and cooperation, because competition is actually important for development of sense of self. I mean, what do kids do when they hit their teens? They push against the parents. It's not a F you to parents. It is, I'm doing this in the service of pushing against what I was given so that I can find who I am. Parents have to learn how to do that. They have to learn to give space to that. And so the entire third density, I would say second density for sure, is all about competition and inside that cooperation. So there's competition, and then cooperation emerges from that, and then there's another conflict that comes in. So there's competition, and then another film, membrane grows around that, and then you have now multicellular organisms, and it grows and grows. That's true in the psychospiritual. So Ra says, well, not Ra, but Quo. I think Quo is another channeled source that's by the LNL research. It's mentioned somewhere, I can't remember, that the energetics of Earth's third density is, you could think of as 70% negative.
Wow. Okay.
Not the souls of being negative.
Yeah.
But the very energetic environment for psychospiritual evolution to gain traction and to force a catalyst for one to choose the positive or negative. There's the friction is built into it. Because it helps us to discern the wheat from the chaff, to burn off, and to then make decisions that will be the metaphysical thrust for the next 2 billion years, our choice of polarity. And so the entire environment of third density is 70% negative on the polarity of the two polarities, where someone who's chosen the positive path, which is the path of wholeness, is immersed in the energetics of the ethos of separation, 70%.
Yeah.
And that is a good thing, because it helps us to refine, those who choose the positive path, to refine more and more and more what it is that we're choosing, and how to choose wholeness, not excluding the negative, but inside ourselves, to incorporate the inner parts of ourselves that we would maybe find not pleasing, or to accept other people, and then to choose that. So that's why it's a grind. It's going up the stream against the stream. Whereas the negative person, they're already 70% there if they just float along with the spirits of the day, as the Apostle Paul says, or the world, or the sarx, flesh, the false self, all that. That's 70% STS. So they have to do 20% on top of that, to get to your 95 or 25%. So how do you sit with this?
I mean, that all resonates with me, and it makes a lot of sense by way of how it's an understandable explanation as to kind of the energetics of what I feel like I've experienced. But more than that, I appreciate I know you've worked with Richard Rohr's within the spiral dynamics community, the transcend and include, or include and transcend.
Yes.
That's kind of what I feel. Part of what you're saying. My own experience has been, that's easier. It's easier said than done. My own experience has been how do I properly include the aspects of myself that I want to love, that my inner child, all of the personality structure aspects that are trying to find their own time of day, light of day. How do I love those aspects, accept those aspects both in myself and in other people, while also parenting them well, for lack of better words, transcending them, but not spiritual bypassing, you get what I'm saying?
Oh,
and I almost feel like that's part of the game that I play most every day. I feel like is, how do I learn to be here, in this world, but not of it?
Okay.
Jesus said, but to say it another way is, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's a very Western question, because we're presupposing individualism here. And what I would invite us to do is to look at individuation versus individualism. Individuation is, we are unique, energetic fractals of the one infinite. We are the one infinite creator, and we provide the one infinite creator a unique, energetic fractal that is your essence, or your particular signature that then moves through third density all the way up to seventh density, and so on and so forth. But we are also simultaneously energetically one with everything else. So, for example, if you were to look at the rings of Saturn, I'm just going to make this up, but let's say you take the rings of Saturn.
Sure.
You could see them as one continuous, from a certain perspective, just one continuous loop around. But when you get closer, you see that there's strata. So that's what we are, is that you might have a particular strata of energetics that is uniquely you, certainly in the center, but how you get more and more individuated is through your relationships with other people. So, for example, you are you because of the relationship, the thought form that exists between you and your wife. And you are you because of the thought form that exists between each one of your daughters. And so think of this, like I tell people when I'm doing counseling with them, is that if it's a couple, I'll say, I'm not treating you and I'm not treating you. My client is that thing in the middle. Because for me, that third entity is what the two of you have created. It is an entity. It's a real sentient presence that actually includes both of you and then transcends, because we talk of a couple, which is made of a plurality too, but it's a singularity. We say a couple, not the couples. I mean, you know what I mean? It's one entity, or a family is made up of multiple entities, you see?
Yeah, man.
But what is that is created by the different poles, the two people? Yeah. There is that gestalt, that thing that they create, but then also that thing creates them. So it's they create something new, but then that thing, as more and more energetic investment happens, becomes its own sentient presence, and that begins to feed back into the energy of their creators. So it's like this feedback loop, you know?
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So I would say that the great thing that you and I can do as Western people, especially as white men, you know, straight white men, well, I can speak for myself. When I kind of awakened to my own privilege, as a straight white man, I went through my own stages of white guilt, and I'm going to say I'm glad I went through it. It was important for me to see, and then I transcended that. But it wasn't ever an exclusion of it. It's still right there. The question for me now is, how can I use my white male privilege, since I have it? Not that I signed up for it, but since I have it here, how can I use it to bring up the body of Christ, or the greater planetary logos, which is what we are all making up, the entity that is the planetary entity. How can I help steward and create fractals of wholeness, wholeness making, where I can go to the marginalized cells of this one body and use my white male privilege in some way. And so, but I don't know exactly how to do that, other than I pray to be an instrument, and I keep my eyes open. So when situations of mentorship where I get mentored by people come up, I will say yes to it. And then if other situations come up where I can do something to help use my white male privilege to infuse more equality, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
But
beautiful.
How we get through our own shadow sides and learn to accept it and love it, I think it happens through desiring, willing to will our will in concordance with the one infinite creator. So Law of One, Ra says, the greatest way to serve is to serve the infinite creator and start at that level. And so rather than say, for example, I would really hope I do well in this meeting today. Not a bad thing to say,
Sure.
But what if we were to start our day with something like, I fully, without reserve, give my mind, body, spirit complex to you, infinite creator, to the one infinite creator, for the highest and greatest good for all my other selves and creation, including myself. And help me to be an instrument of your peace and joy today. Like if we start there, then we have the faith that my actions today, even if it's just opening the door for somebody or whatever it is, that we have the faith that our actions are bearing fruit, are oriented by our will, and that there's a grace. The Law of One calls it the law of doubling or squares, where every time that we pray the same prayer or that other people pray in one, it's exponentially stronger to the point where 10 people count for like 1,024. It's crazy. So that law of squares, that's grace, and that pulls in the reality that we're hoping to manifest from say the future, it pulls it into manifestation, or from pure potentiality, pulls it into manifestation, and we become the conduits, manifested embodied conduits that bring it into manifestation precisely from our yes, our Mary's yes. Mary saying, yes, I will bear the Christ for the light of the world. I will do that through my own body. So that's a lot of concepts all at once. I hope it makes some sense.
Oh, it does. Absolutely. The way that you said that was excellent. And that resonates exactly with what I've been feeling and thinking. My words, I appreciated even just those words that you gave to start the day with, in a slightly different but similar way. The words that have been on my mind are, I desire to be a vehicle of loving communication today in whatever way is most helpful.
Beautiful.
And so I resonate 100% with the way you're saying that. And I really appreciate that.
With people like you, who aren't in crisis, but are really you're really looking at the step of the adept is what you're trying to do. You're very green ray. Like I see the green ray aura on you. I mean, you're very, very green ray, a lot of blue too. So, and that the blue is more in potential. There's the integrity that you have about your own vocation, and that is brilliant. It's a brilliant blue, and it is waiting to be birthed. Waiting to be birthed, and it is asking you to, because the blue is related to the orange. If you look chakra wise, they're part of the same kind of sphere in a way, and so
interesting.
Yeah, blue, sort of the inverse of blue is orange, or you might say orange is kind of the slower frequency of blue. So they're interconnected, and so it's also metaphysically you can see how brilliant that fact is, because the more that we get into our blue ray, which is honest communication. Honest communication doesn't mean just telling the truth. Like a lot of the disclosure people, it's like, well, we got to get people to talk about this and that, and just. Honest communication is about having the inner knowledge that when I speak, to the degree that I can, is going to be as my yes will mean yes and my no will mean no. Gotcha. I'm speaking with an integrity where my value system is being incarnated and expressed through not just my mouth, but my very energetics and however I'm communicating. And embodiment is a communication, that's blue ray living. Beautiful. So it is requiring us to then constantly, it's like you never get over it. You're always working on the lower chakras. That is the foundational, that is the clay that we make the beautiful art. And you never stop with your hands down there,
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful, man. That's so helpful. I really appreciate just that explanation right there. I would love to. I feel that the validation in talking about this now, that this is what I've been looking for, with whom I can maybe more honestly both articulate and walk through these things. Because I'll be honest, the circles that I'm in, I can never really be that honest, because I'm still in the Christian circles. I'm a Christian minister, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I've always had to be really veiled. So I think I've been longing for a place to where I don't have to be so veiled. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you saying it.
That's exactly why I founded the Building Forth community, because there wasn't much of a place that I could find that you would have people who love the conventional stuff. I mean, in fact, the more adept a person becomes, the more Ross says, know yourself, accept yourself, become the creator. Like those are the three ways to discipline the personality. And when you become the creator, you become the most humble servant of all. This is not my will, but your will be done. And the personality becomes transparent. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist or it pops away. It's not an Eastern notion of kill the ego, but it's to discipline the ego in a sense that the false self that's desiring the power, prestige, and possessions is not in control. It exists and then is used by the true self to steward wholeness and goodness in the world. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
That's that transparency. Well, yeah. So what I would say is that the high adept, in my opinion, is someone who sees very clearly that the exoteric, which means the outer, is the esoteric. And the esoteric is the exoteric. And they're simply the edges of one reality. And for anybody to get too ensconced in both of these can be problematic. Yeah. Although I would say, this is my bias, but I have seen a lot more people that I would, in the exoteric realm, that are never needing or interested in this stuff that you and I are interested in, but they live very green, blue-ray. I mean, they are the salt of the fourth density, you know? Yeah. Because you can live a fully pure life of the one infinite creator, a full adept kind of life, just with the exoteric. On the contrary, I have seen people who very much delve into the esoteric, and they have a very robust knowledge of metaphysics. Yeah. But they make the mistake, what Ken Wilber called it, the pre-trans fallacy. They make the mistake of feeling that they're transcended all of this lower stuff because they can do magic or they have some kind of, inner knowledge of the things behind the things. Yet their operational gnosis and worldview is actually mired in the bellicosity thought form that we all created, in this third density. And they don't know it, So I have seen more people who are more harvestable in the exoteric realm than in the esoteric.
Man, wow, that's interesting.
But for people who have the exoteric down and then don't throw it out, well, then you learn, like the Apostle Paul, you learn how to be all things to all people. And so you can do esoteric, high adept work, subtle realm, out of body, all these things. You can do these things with using only exoteric conventional terms. Not in a way to manipulate people, but in the way to meet people where they're at and then help them on their path according to their own free will. And that, I think that's what we are called to do.
Man, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you validating that, because that's what I've been feeling, even for myself, as a part of my own vocation, by way of, you said it earlier, being a bridge in some way. Earlier Ryan was, forget Christianity, let's find something else. And I'm trying, and I really appreciate just what I'm receiving from you here is the include and transcend. I've been reading Daskalos.
Oh, great! Who got you into that Daskalos?
I found
it wasn't
Daskalos. Me. No, I heard you mention Daskalos, so I was going to ask you about it.
Oh yeah,
but I found Daskalos through Lars Muhl.
Okay.
Lars Muhl's work. Okay, he was an Aramaic. He studied the Aramaic, and he mentioned what's Daskalos or Stylianos's either daughter or son.
Daughter.
The works of light.
Yeah.
So he mentioned that. So I started reading that. And then I got into Stylianos's the esoteric practices and the teachings.
Yeah.
Okay. I have questions.
Because I've studied all of that, and I do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you do, like, you work through those practices and exercises and everything, and
yeah, and they're beginner stuff.
Okay.
That's not. I mean, yes, and one doesn't have to do any of that and still do high magical work.
Gotcha.
But yes, I discovered Daskalos the same time I did the Law of One, and the first few years, what I did is I would do, contrasting of the metaphysics. And what I've come to is that, and this is my own opinion, but the Law of One for me is a presentation of this perennial philosophy that is a wider net than the Daskalos material, but the Daskalos material fills out the flesh of the skeleton of the Law of One.
Wow, interesting.
That's sort of how I see it.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that, because I've been feeling resonance as I read it, but I've also been not confused, but slightly surprised by how Bible focused, and if I can say Jesus focused, it feels like some of the Daskalos' work is. Mm-hmm. So I was going to ask you that, like, do you feel that there's resonance between the two? Mm-hmm. If I can ask, I know it's 2:18, but
I have time.
This is the only metaphysical question. That's not true, but the primary question that I wanted to just get your thoughts on is, if I can say in general, the metaphysical framework, this little piece of the metaphysical framework that I feel is helpful depending on how it turns out, it helps shape all the rest. And it is, and I could be wrong in tons of different ways, but let me say how I experienced the awareness through the Kabbalah, through the Secret Gospel of John, through a lot of Hermetic work, and then of course what you get through A Course in Miracles. And then, I was similarly at that same time reading Advaita Vedanta, and, you get a lot of the Maya illusion stuff there. Yeah. But one of the things that I felt was somewhat of a pattern that I was noticing was that part of what we're experiencing on third density was not so much maybe a mistake as it was a diversion from if you want to say, the mind of God or the will of God, however you'd like to say that. But then, some of the Law of One comes in, and correct me if I'm wrong. I really want to understand this better. Some of the Law of One and some other texts that I know some people would classify as New Age but just even really lovely texts like The Way of Mastery, whoever the author is of that. That is a lot more, this is an expression or an extension of the mind of God. Yeah. And it is much more the veil of forgetfulness that is part of, as we experience the problem, and part of the illusion of separation, much more orients around the veil of forgetfulness rather than a problem that preceded that, for lack of better words. So how would you?
I have done, in fact, if I ever do write a book, it's going to be along those lines right there. The actual question. And I'm trying to write on it right now, actually.
Wow.
So,
beautiful.
But I'm only going to be able to offer you my own distorted way, So take whatever I'm saying and digest it to the degree that it's helpful, and then spit it out when it's not.
Yeah.
What you just said would be located, because what you said two different worldviews there. The first worldview was that we went wrong some way. And that's sort of the traditional Christian, the sin is to miss the mark. And so we as a humanity, the fallen state, missed the mark, okay? And so that was one worldview. And then the next one you said was, okay, maybe it's not that, but I'm receiving that this is a divine expression. It's all great, but maybe the problem can be located in the veil of forgetting. Yeah. So that's the other one. And what I want to say is, without throwing those out, they're both correct in their own way, but there's a hierarchy of truths, like Russian nesting dolls.
Okay. Yeah.
And what you just said is probably the fourth layer. So there's going to be like 6 more layers of truth that include and transcend all the way up. So what I'm going to try to do is give you the biggest one to the degree that I can.
Beautiful. Please.
And what I would say, and this is 11 years of really discerning this, and I have a master's in theology as well. So, I've just done a lot of work with my own personal work with like Richard Rohr's works and whatnot. So this is coming from that kind of legacy. What I would say is, well, first off, have you heard of Alfred North Whitehead? Have you studied his?
Yeah, absolutely. And Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah. Alfred North Whitehead and Teilhard de Chardin, those, in my opinion, those were wanderers. Probably from the Ra group, to be honest. But anyways, those two are now being rediscovered within the Christian milieu, primarily in Protestantism, progressive Protestantism, which is they're free enough to do it. Now, in the Catholic Church, the strains are there. I mean, of course, Teilhard was Catholic priest. Whatever is in process theology is clearly in Catholicism, but it's overmired with so much of Thomistic substance theology versus process theology that most Catholics only understand their faith from the degree of substance theology, and that's where we get into some problems.
I'm with you.
Process theology holds that everything is in process of becoming. And even things that are some, you could see solid, i.e. a stone or a statue, they're actually what's called enduring objects that they're in process every nano of the nanosecond. Every photon as a kind of quantum segment of time is recreating that statue at the speed of light, say, but it is that every photon is choosing to reproduce that which was given. And every moment actually is a moment of dying, because Whitehead would say every moment achieves satisfaction, achieves joy of being itself, to have come to some sort of completion, dies, perishes, and then transmits its gnosis of self, its joy plus all of the biases that it learned, transmits to the next moment, which arises and then incorporates this entire gestalt. So it creates the next movement. That is dying, that is death, and resurrection. That is, every moment is the Paschal mystery, this dying and rising, this dying and rising. Okay. And by the way, and that is why the Ankh is the great archetype of archetypes that we can see in the Law of One. It is the archetype. Now, what I would say is God, the infinite creator, is experiencing itself through us. It is becoming through every entity, and that includes the universe all the way down to the subatomic particle.
The elements. Gotcha.
But the higher, quote, higher levels of God, these the more so we have the logos level, and then we have the sub-logos level, and then you've got the sub-logos level, which is where the humans are. These aren't drop down scales. Like, in other words, the sub-logos level is not as good or holy or something as the logos level. No, it's exactly, it's not, I wouldn't say the opposite, but think of it this way. Instead of a drop down, think of a complexity that this logos level, I'm just going to call it blue just for fun, just say it's a standard blue. But then when we get to the sub logos, let's say it's a brilliant blue with orange and green, and it's like a diamond studded. So the substance is not different from itself at logos level, but down here it is in the involution, inside, coming in and complexifying more and down into its becoming in the manifested world. That is the cutting edge of God. The third density, Ross says, is the axis upon which the entire universe turns. That is a quote.
Man, wow.
The veiled third density is the axis upon which the entire universe turns. Why? Because in third density, with the veil, God experiences God's self in, through, and as sub-logoi who learn the meaning of their own nature, which is the one infinite creator, through love and wisdom and all the knowing and accepting, to know it in a new way that is completely not possible unless you have the veil.
Gotcha.
Because infinity cannot experience itself. White light cannot experience itself unless that white light comes up with a novel idea called finity. So we can think of this as a prism. The white light shines through the prism and comes out as the different rays. So now we have light on both sides of the prism. It's all the one infinite creator. Here is, on this side, the white is pure potentiality. But here we have hue, we have differentiation, we have random, we have different degrees of embodiment, different frequencies. All the same ontological divinity, but they're expressions that are different. And it is through the relatedness, the random interactions here, that the one infinite creator experiences itself. But
gotcha.
But here's what happened is, without the veil being discovered, because Ross said this was a part of the evolution of the one infinite creator, was to discover this novel concept. Just like finity was at the, quote, beginning, the novel concept was to, if you will, put another prism into third density to where that which is true, in other words, we are the one infinite creator experiencing itself, doesn't know at a gnosis level that it is the one infinite creator and that it's connected to everything else, including the one infinite creator. You see? Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just on that point, so in a way, and I think probably part of what I have in my mind is it fair to say that in a way, it's almost like the hero's journey? It's almost like there and back again, by way of beginning as an extension of the one source, and as an emanation or an extension, it's finding ourselves in these, I don't want to say lower levels, but in these different dimensions, however you'd like to say that, which includes the complete finiteness, the complete forgetfulness, to the full remembering, and then back again, right? Something to that effect.
It is.
But so go ahead.
No, go ahead. Your question. Yeah.
If that's halfway correct, would it be true to say that there are some beings who started at a higher level, for lack of better words, and have found themselves, if you want to say like wanderers, who have chosen to, I don't want to use the word because incarnate is a good word, to incarnate on the third density, and then who are already, if you can say, who are already from the
sixth dimension,
or sixth. While at the same time, are there other beings who have evolved from for lack of better words, lower level?
Oh yeah, I mean all of that is true. That's a different question, and we can maybe connect that at a different time.
Yeah,
let me just go back really quick to my process stuff, because I want to finish up that thought, and then I got to get going.
Sure.
So I think I've set the stage where we can see that the veil is holy. Like the veil was chosen by the one infinite creator, by the logoi, in the service of the one infinite creator, to give the one infinite creator a better, more intense experience of itself. So that is supremely sacred. Now, from this side of the veil, we have a deep, deep mind sense that we must have done something.
That's it.
And so we create mythos of being exiled. And the one infinite, the veil also allows for the creation of thought forms. These are, as I said, individuated, sentient nexus of energy that have their own beingness. There's going to be an energetic membrane that distinguishes them from the next thought form, And the more that people invest through ritual or belief systems or thoughts, it invests into these thought forms, and they grow. They grow in their own complexity, just like any organism. The veil offers the opportunity for thought forms to then exist within the spectrum of the negative polarity. Okay, so a lot of these thought forms would be what we would call demons.
Yeah, sure. Okay, gotcha.
And the word Satan or Lucifer and how it's been understood in our culture, in my opinion, is really the personification of the veil. Okay, because on this side we feel like we have to blame something.
Yeah,
that's the scapegoat mechanism. So we're going to blame Satan for creating the misery, let's say.
Yeah.
But here's the irony: is that because of our belief systems that create these thought forms, we do in fact contribute to a metaphysical reality. Now, it's not reality in capital R, but it is a small r reality of sentient thought forms that do contain the power that we might attribute to being Satan.
Wow, that's very interesting.
But the thing is that all of that comes from what Ra talks about is the great, say, blindness or sin that we all have. I mean, Ra's not using these words. Is the bellicosity thought form, the thought form that is based in grief. It's based in fear first. And I did a podcast, maybe you've heard it. It's called The Skin of Primal Human Suffering.
Oh, okay.
And it shows these layers. The first layer is like a skin, like an epidermis and dermis. The first layer would be grief. The grief that we feel like we're exiled. What did we do?
Yeah.
And I'm sad. The next one is shame and sadness.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The first one is fear, not grief. The first one is fear. The second one is shame and grief. But especially in the West, and particularly men, we don't really have a cultural acceptance of allowing ourselves to look and feel vulnerable or weak.
Yeah.
The third layer is anger. Okay. Now this one we know real well, but if you take all three of these, two of which, and that is the shame and grief, and then the lower one is fear, two of these three layers we don't even identify. But if you take all three of these layers and see them energetically, as I do, it is red and orange and yellow with like all intertwined and muddy and but roasting, and it is energy that's alive, and it's like the eye of Sauron. It's absolutely it's a Taurus. It is what we created it. Okay, we humans created it, but it creates us, just like relationships do.
Wow.
And so things like negative Orion, the negative polarity can only do so much. They can take what is there and then accentuate it, or maybe invite us to not look over here and only look at this thing. But they can't create something novel because they're disconnected from source by choice. Well, I mean, not metaphysically fully, but their path includes the accentuation of separation. Bellicosity by its nature is the energetics of separation. And so what Orion and groups like this can do is that they accentuate our own inner bellicosity at the micro level, match it with the bellicosity at the macro level, and then create a situation where we, through our development, we choose remedies for this existential angst that we always are feeling, but we choose to create institutions. Orion's not doing this. We are choosing to create institutions that are grounded in bellicosity.
Wow.
And so when we achieve like capitalism is kind of I'm not saying that capitalism is all evil, but I'm just saying if you look at its way of being, to be successful at the capitalistic game is to have existed and risen on a ladder of manipulation and social oppression in many, many ways. You know what I mean? Not entirely, but I'm not trying to scapegoat it.
That's what it's born out of.
It is born out of it. So to win in Christian nationalism, where Jesus is for us and Jesus wants us to have the best everything and then screw everybody else that doesn't, this rise of Christian nationalism in the name of Jesus, or metaphysically, in the name of the green ray energy, we don't realize that our actual God and the very ladder and structure that we've created is bellicosity. And that is the lower chakras, that is the entrapment there. And I would argue that's what Satan is. Like, I think Satan is the personification of the bellicosity that we have created, not any archons, not any Illuminati or none of that. We have created it, but we can also go through it, and that is by you and I choosing every day to live from a place of integrity with our value system, and then becoming servants of the one infinite creator of wholeness, stewarding wholeness, making in the world. Yeah.
Man, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for all that. That was probably the most helpful explanation I've heard to date on any of that. So thank you, man. I really appreciate your time. This has been both fun and helpful.
Yes,
so.
Me too. Wonderful. God bless, and I'm glad you reached out, man. It's good to have a brother to walk with.
Thanks. Likewise.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. Goodbye.
Yep. Yeah. I actually wanted to add a couple more things to put this on your plate as well. And because there was a thought that I actually didn't get to finish towards the end. Please forgive me for just being so wordy and verbose. I wish hopefully one day I'll mature enough to speak at a little bit slower pace when I get excited. But at the moment, I'm just finished running 2 miles and kind of walking, waiting for my kid to get out of drumming lesson. But I'd like to share that I started off the last part of our talk saying that God, or the infinite creator, is in process of becoming, and that every moment is this moment of becoming. So the first thing I'd like to say is some people have talked about pantheism, which is everything is God, and I don't deny that. Some people talk about panentheism, that everything is in God and God is in everything, and I don't deny that either. Some people talk about process theology as pan-experientialism, that everything is God in experience, becoming in what Whitehead calls actual occasions, events of God becoming. And I don't deny that either, but I'll borrow something from kind of a movement in my own faith tradition, Catholicism, that I like a lot, and that's pan-sacramentalism. And the word sacrament means to honor something as supremely holy. And this correlates well with what the Law of One says, and where Ra talks about how the violet ray, when someone is operating from the violet ray, so this is this is an intelligent infinity, intelligent energy. This is the sum, the whole. When someone is operating from this level, they are able to see that every moment is a sacrament. Every moment of becoming is a sacrament of the one infinite creator manifesting the creator self in, through, and as that moment. And we, as God in the third density experience, have, through our free will, the capacity to intend our embodiment as the channels through which God's becoming can be recognized, recognized. To cognize means to think with. The word co means with, co, and cognize, then Gnize is to know, gnosis. So to know with means to cognize. And then, so one might say that is the God's nature is a plurality that is becoming. But to recognize means to know with again. And that is what we are in third density, is through our free will with the veil, is to grow to the perspective of recognizing God's own becoming, to know and view everything that is becoming, including ourselves, in a violet ray, which is to offer our own incarnations as transparent or crystallized channels through which God's becoming into the third density is done at the highest and greatest levels, the whole level, the violet ray. That's pan-sacramentalism. And lastly, I'd say that the purpose, I think, this is my, again, bias, but the fact that we have this thought form, this bellicosity thought form that we ourselves have created, and it has actually created us. It continues to work in, through, and as us, something which is it's a purview and belongs within the lower chakras, but because of its intensity and because of our feeding it, especially when we think that we're acting out of higher centers, so we entrap ourselves. Because of those things, the bellicosity thought form is a kind of trap that we're not aware of. And Ross says that the only way to change karma, the inertia of karma, so things at rest stay at rest, things that are in motion stay at motion, this bellicosity thought form is in motion and has been, and Ra indicates that it has been our great blockage to our collective in learning to live in the heart, and thus get ready for third density or fourth density lessons. That there became the way that Ra said that we get through this is through forgiveness. Forgiveness is the forgiveness principle is what allows bellicosity to dissipate. Because one does forgiveness, I believe it would start at the green ray, but I think a full kind of forgiveness would necessitate, probably more of the blue and the indigo, but certainly you don't get higher levels of activation of those centers unless one is seated in the green ray. And I think that part of the way that the one infinite creator develops is through these seeming problems that can't be overcome. In other words, what do you do when there is a metaphysical issue like the bellicosity that we ourselves have created, and given that Earth's humanity, according to the law of one, is a motley crew made up of lots of different souls from different parts, often are third density repeaters. So this is kind of normal, but it seems that our particular population is one that keeps repeating third density, and the question is, would we continue just to repeat, ad infinitum, never really fully being able to transition out of that bellicosity, the gravity, the spiritual gravity of separation and bellicosity? Can we do that? Well, I think at the very macro level, at the cosmic, primal logos level, the one infinite creator, this is an opportunity for the creator to grow to become itself in a new way. And so this is my speculation, and I very well could be just way too Christian, which I would accept that criticism. But I think I can make a pretty good case from the Law of One using just that source to outline the following. And that is, I think that Yahweh is another name for our Son Logos. I think God, you could say, the local God is the Son Logos. And that Yahweh indeed, I believe, was the Sublogos. And we see from the Law of One material that Yahweh has a bias. Well, I'm saying the Sublogos is Yahweh. Ra did say that the Sublogos. Ra said, that Yahweh was a member of the Confederation and the Yahweh group, and that the Sublogos has a bias towards kindness. Ra also says that the Sublogos can only give us the catalysts of the first three chakras, and that it is our job as sublogoi to use the catalyst, then to pick to choose a polarity, and then advance on that to develop the higher energy centers. And I think that the experience of the Earth's stuckness, if you will, in the thought form of bellicosity, and in this entrenchable stuckness needing forgiveness, the forgiveness principle, that there might be a way that the whole thing was set up, allowed to evolve for God's own becoming, through the experience of the Sublogos experiencing itself as Yahweh, which formed a relationship, a bond with the particular souls that Yahweh had been guarding as a guardian prior. And through this relationship, created some karmic entanglements that allowed for the beginning development of this bellicosity, even as Yahweh, the bond between Yahweh and Earth humanity, also allowed for very deep and profound movement towards learning and knowing the Law of One and transmitting it. So there's a mixture of results of Yahweh's involvement there. And I think that was actually, from a very high macro perspective, allowed to happen as part of Yahweh's own development, because Yahweh then moves into a self-knowledge of being Emmanuel, or Yod He Shin Vo He. Yahweh, in other words, is I am. Then we move into Emmanuel as I am with you. And that thought form, that self-identity of Yahweh moving into the I am with you, not just I am, but I am with you, is incarnated, if you will, in and through the beautiful bond with the Jewish people who, through ritual and culture and faith, have always had this knowledge of the one infinite creator here in the sublogoic level as our son, being with us, being with the Jewish people. And that one might say that existed incarnated as a people through the culture, ritual, and faith, and as a meta narrative of the people. And then in the fullness of time, in a kairos moment, as opposed to chronos. A kairos moment meaning something enters and forever changes. A catalyst that changes the something qualitative in the Earth's third density perspective. And that is what I'm calling the Jesus Christ event, or Jesus Christ actual occasion, if I'm borrowing Whitehead's words, where the entity, let me say, it necessitated several different ingredients to make this event occur. And I would say that the entity that Law of One talks about, there was an entity that volunteered to be the messenger known as Yehoshua or Yeshua, Jesus. I think we needed that. I think we needed to have the Emmanuel identity of Yahweh, and as well as the thought form that was created in men, nurtured by the thousands of years of cultural ritual through the chosen people, the Jews. And this created a kind of landing pad, a metaphysical landing pad, that a portal could be opened up where the sub-logos, which is a tier, if you will, an order higher, not more complex, but certainly more holistic, because we are the body of the Son Logos. So, but in this way, the sub-logos came face to face with itself as third density, as a third density entity. So what I'm saying here is that the entity known as Jesus, it was a wanderer, a fourth density wanderer moving to fifth density, but instead chose to come in and through the third density experience as a part of a mission. That entity's job was to fully embody in a singularity the energetics of the thought form of Emmanuel, and basically channel that with perfect fidelity through the own free will. So it necessitated, God is subject to God's own laws, if you will, free will coming through, channeling Emmanuel, so that Emmanuel, as the macro presence, crystallizes and singularizes into the particularity of a historical moment in third density for the purpose of few things. One would be to give the one infinite creator an experience of itself where a higher tier incarnates as itself in a tier that is more complexified into third density. So it would be similar to where, let's say, you're made up of trillions of cells, but you maybe there's a cancer or something inside your cell, so you actually become one of your cells and then teach the other cells that are in the tumor how to be cells in the way that is conforming to whatever needs to happen at a homeostasis for cells. But anyways, it would be you becoming a cell and then installing something inside that epicenter, that tumor, some kind of consciousness, seed form, thought form, which I like to call the cosmic forgiveness principle. And that seed form then grows over 2,000 years in consciousness. And it is the forgiveness principle that has the capacity, when we live inside that, no longer I, but Christ who lives within me, live inside that forgiveness principle and act as channelers of that forgiveness principle, that the bellicose thought form that we created is thus decreased also by us. So it's a way that
the infinite creator learns about itself by becoming one, incarnating as one of us. And it also allows for us to, which is the creator, to then learn the meaning of love enough to polarize to the point of being able to enjoy the lessons of fourth density. So that's it needs to be clarified a little bit more. I'm trying to work on my way to phrase that so it's a little clearer, but maybe there's something there that might be of interest. Again, hold it with a grain of salt. Okay, thanks for listening.